call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission at 6:30 p.m. These are working or not working?
No.
Okay, so speak up. All commissioners are noted except for Commissioner Wakeman, who's not present and excused. Has the meeting been properly noticed?
Yes.
Okay, so the first thing we have on our agenda is the approval of the July 23rd meeting minutes. I'd like to open the item up for discussion and any questions. Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So we have a public hearing on the conditional use application to construct 4 chimneys that exceed the maximum building height on a new single-family residence at residential property 3534 North Lake Drive, property owner Chris Abley. We'll open the public hearing at 6:31 p.m. by having our planning director introduce the item and read the report.
Thank you, Trustee Carpenter. So as indicated in the packet for tonight's meeting, there's a brief overview of why we're here to see this application. On August 22nd, 2019, the Village's Design Review Board approved architectural plans for the construction of a new single-family home to be located at 3534 North Lake Drive. The plans included 4 chimneys protruding from the roof. The parcel is zoned R1, which per Village Code 535-19A has a height maximum of 30 feet. Of note, building height is measured from the established grade of the frontage of the street to the mean height level between the eaves and ridges of the pitched roof. The proposed roof midline is 29 feet 11 inches and 7/8, which conforms to the required height limitation. However, each of the chimneys exceeds that height, and per Village Code 535-30A, architectural projections such as spires, belfries, parapet walls, cupolas, domes, flues, and chimneys are conditional uses in all districts if they exceed the height limitations of this chapter. Excuse me. The applicant has accordingly applied for a conditional use permit to allow the construction of the chimneys as proposed. Proposed operations. The 4 chimneys would protrude from the roof on the east elevation of the in-service fireplaces located in the first and second floors of the proposed home. While actual permit plans detailing the chimney specifications have not been submitted, building code would require that the chimneys extend at least 3 feet from the roof protrusion. 2 of the proposed chimneys are shown to extend approximately 7.5 feet, and the other 2 are shown to be approximately 14 feet, suggesting that they are intended to be architectural point of interest. That point was raised within the Design Review Board's consideration and approval, and minutes from that meeting are attached within the packet for reference. As a follow-up to that, I did email some additional information yesterday with more specific information on the specific heights of the chimneys that we can get into as soon as I finish this. Review and approval per Village Code 535-25, the Village Plan Commission shall review the site, existing and proposed structures, architectural plans, neighboring uses, and the proposed operations. Conditions such as landscape and architectural design, type of construction, planting screens, and operational controls may be required by the Village Plan Commission upon its finding that these are necessary to fulfill the purpose and intent of this chapter. Furthermore, per Village Code 535-25C, no conditional use permit shall be authorized by the Plan Commission unless such commission finds that the establishment, maintenance, and operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. The conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. The establishment of the conditional use will not impede the normal or orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district, or have a negative impact on the diversity of the types of businesses located in the district. Adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or other necessary facilities have been or are being provided. Adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. The conditional use shall, in all other respects, conform to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located, except as such regulations may, in each instance, be modified by the Board of Trustees pursuant to the recommendations of the Plan Commission. And lastly, the conditional use is in accordance with and subject to all applicable laws and regulations. So that is the information within the packet. As a follow-up to that, yesterday I did email more specifics in terms of the chimneys. So the 2 outer chimneys, the height from the reference grade is 37 feet and 6 inches to the top of the masonry flue, 40 feet at the top of the shroud. And the two tall middle chimneys, height from the reference grade is 41 feet 6 inches to the top of the masonry flue and 44 feet to the top of the shroud.
Has there been any additional information or statements from the applicant at this point? Aside from that?
Other than that email, no, nothing else has been
Okay.
submitted.
And then are there any comments from members of the public?
No.
Okay,
Well, nothing's been submitted. There is one person who was called
sure.
and has attended.
So I think that at this point we can
Yep.
allow members of the public.
Sure.
So we'll just need your name and
Sure.
address.
Luke Sims, and we live at 3562 North Lake Drive, which is the second house north of the subject property. Okay, there's that subject, there's one house in between. We also have an Eschweiler designed Mediterranean. Our total height on the house is 26 feet from the ground level to the top of the roof. By comparison, this house that's being proposed is, and I understand Bart's explained to me how it's calculated, but the actual top of the roof line is a little over 35 feet. So already it's a big house visually. We don't like the idea of the chimneys, and as Bart points out, the top chimney will be up at 44 feet, and the lower ones, so there'll be two at 44 feet and two at 41 feet, something like that. I understand that the chimneys are on the lake side, so they're not going to be as visible as they would be on the Lake Drive side. But right now, they still are going to be up considerably. The house is big at 17,000 square feet. So it's got a very big footprint to start with. And I think the chimneys are only going to detract from that. I did ask Bart, and he doesn't have the information available as to whether there had been another conditional use for similar chimneys in Shorewood in any recent memory. And I think the answer has to be no, mostly because it would require new construction. It would probably be a very big house, and it's unlikely that someone's going to add in a renovation a chimney of this size. So I think it's out of character with what has been in Shorewood, and it's certainly out of character in terms of height from the existing neighborhood.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a little addition to what Bart had mentioned concerning the terms and conditions, or the terms under which the Planning Commission would evaluate the application. There's been a change in the last few years. There's been some changes at the state legislative level in the state statute. So I want to read a portion of Wisconsin statute 62.23 sub 7. It says, if an applicant for a conditional use permit meets or agrees to meet all of the requirements and conditions specified in the city ordinance or those imposed by the city zoning board, the city shall grant the conditional use permit. Any condition imposed must be related to the purpose of the ordinance and be based on substantial evidence. So what that means, to translate that, is if by substantial evidence the applicant can establish that the conditions in 535.25C can be met, then you're compelled under the state statute to grant it. So what does that mean as we go down 1 through 7 of 535.25C? We look at number 1, the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. If they can establish by substantial evidence that it will not be detrimental, then you move on to the next one. Will the conditional use not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property? If they can establish by substantial evidence, and then you go down the line. So the state statute compels the Planning Commission to grant it if they can meet the conditions under 535.25C. That is not a policy decision by the village, that is a policy decision that was made by the state of Wisconsin in their change of the state statute. So just keep that in mind. Keep those two things in mind.
Trustee Carpenter?
Hang on one second.
I'm finished.
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask me, Trustee Bear, those are, I understand, conditional use 100%, and if they can prove they meet the standards, we must grant them the whatever, the approval. But they're pretty vague. So number 2 was, is the enjoyment of the neighbor, is that what I heard you say? It's kind of low on the phone.
Oh, I'll read it just for the record so everyone has it. I'm looking at 535.25 sub C. That would be sub 2. It says, no conditional use permit shall be authorized by the Plan Commission unless such commission shall find that. Sub 2, the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purpose already permitted, nor substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. So that's
Okay,
sub
so
2.
you would have to prove that someone would have to prove that it does impair property value?
No, any decision has to be made on what the state statutes refer to as substantial evidence. And technically, the burden is of course on the applicant, but there's another portion of the statute that also says that any decision made by the Planning Commission on these issues should be based upon substantial evidence as well.
Okay,
So
and Bart,
it's a little bit vague there in the statute.
has the evidence been provided that they aren't going to substantiate property value loss or harm to their, or interfere with the use of a residential property, right to be residential?
Well, that's for the board to decide based upon the application.
Oh,
Correct.
but the staff must have a recommendation.
I'd be happy to provide a recommendation if you're asking for one. Just to clarify, I also did review the height of the chimney to the house to the north and to the south. The chimney to the north of the property, so 3550. The chimney is 34 feet. Once again, when we built before our zoning code had that requirement, so there's no conditional use permit on file for it. The house to the south, 3510 Lake Drive, the garage chimney is 36 feet and the house chimney is 49 feet. That is a substantially larger house to the south of there as well. So there are numerous houses along Lake Drive that probably have chimneys that exceed 30 feet, and I don't think it's been injurious and or devalued anyone's property in that respect. So if you're asking for a staff opinion on that, I have no reason to object based on these 7 criteria. But most definitely it is up for the board to, or for the Plan Commission to make that determination. Also, just within the public hearing section of it, we do have that architect here, so if there's any response and or question for her, we do have the architect of the proposed house here to respond as well.
Do we want to allow?
Do you have anything to say right now? Or?
Sure, I'd love to add.
Sure.
a point. I don't know if the elevations have been disseminated at all.
Yeah, I provided them before that you put in yesterday, so we all have the best.
Okay, great. So a couple, I think, key points to consider here are that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Mary Haggerty, team representing Northworks Architects, and we're the designer of the home. So the part of the drive with the chimneys is in fact a historical reference. We are building based on kind of a Georgian design idea. This was covered in detail with the design review board, and we did provide historic references. So the line of the roof and the supporting line of the chimneys is part of that historical reference. So I do understand that the previous home on the property was an Eschweiler, which is more of an Italian Mediterranean. We are departing from that previous style, but we are working within the historic context of architecture and following the lines of that precedent. So, and we did gather a number of facades with very similar, they're obviously not as large as this home, that's true. But there are a number of similar roof lines with relative chimneys in Shorewood, even along Lake Drive, that we did present at the design review board that have a relationship between these kind of high points of the chimney anchoring that look of the front facade. So without those chimneys, the house would certainly look bare. And apart from that, there's a functional consideration where we are obviously allowed to have fireplaces in the house and we need chimneys to make them work. So part of it is the two outer chimneys, as Bart alluded to, we are within our max allowed roof height, but the building code requires that your chimney be at least 2 feet taller than any roof line within a 10-foot radius. So otherwise, there's a fire code issue. So we are required to have those two outer chimneys at that height, and we have set them to that height. So we are not, going crazy with those chimneys. The two interior ones, we are drawing a little bit taller than that for a couple reasons. One is that just the way chimneys draw, it helps when you have multiple chimneys in proximity to have some that are higher than others, in case you ever did want to run all of them at once, if you had a big party or something like that. The draw patterns do affect one another, and you don't want to stack them all at the same height. So that's part of it. Part of it is the aesthetic of building towards the taller middle, which is characteristic of that Georgian precedent. And the third consideration is that the two middle chimneys, which are larger and taller, we have fireplaces on the second floor that are feeding those. So we need to have a certain amount of flue height to draw properly at those fireplaces when they do operate with wood, and they will be wood and gas. They'll have gas provided for convenience, but they are also designed to be wood burning. And relatedly, because those are actually double flues within those chimneys, they're actually wider. It points towards the lake, the width is in the kind of east-west direction, so you don't see it from the front facade. But it needs to have a certain amount of height to it so that proportionally it doesn't look like a weirdly short and stubby chimney. So those two middle ones that are broader are also a little bit taller for all of those reasons. Happy to answer any further questions.
Any further questions?
Is that the end of the public hearing? And I wasn't sure when our question should.
Yeah, it will be, this will, I was going to come over to the public hearing and then we have opportunity to ask questions. Okay. Bart, do you have any?
Nope, that would be it from staff's perspective as well.
Okay. So we will convene the public hearing at 6:47 p.m. Excuse me. And move on to the consideration of conditional use application to construct 4 chimneys that exceed the maximum building height on the new single-family residence at residential property 3534 North Lake Drive, property owner Pearson. So we can open it up to questions and discussion amongst the commissioners. Did you have?
Yeah, I did, and I appreciated the additional information today because I wanted to know what, was the height of the roof and the maximum building height. I mean, it does make sense that, that the maximum height falls between the eaves of the house and the ridge of the roof, that if a chimney needs to be so much higher, that obviously it's going to, you've got an 1/8 of an inch to spare at that measuring point, that obviously the chimneys are going to be over that maximum height. And I had the same question about other houses on Lake Drive. There's quite a few larger houses there. And I did notice in driving past it, the one to the south is a big house, the one to the north, the White House, not quite so much. So I appreciate the information about the chimney height of those two properties. 2 of the conditions that we're supposed to consider, I think the first one about public safety, and that was, and number 6 about, meeting other regulations. My main concern as far as any zoning is the bluff. And because we were always talking about rear setbacks, for properties, and so, I was curious as to what the rear setback was when you're building in the bluff. And it was referenced in the minutes of the design review board, and I see that you confirmed that confirmation of bluff stability prior to the issuance of any permits would be done because of that zoning district. And so in our zoning code, it says the rear setback shall be at least such distance as to ensure the stabilization of the bluff area. sufficient distance from the bluff areas to prevent injury or damage to adjacent property, and sufficient distance from the bluff area to provide for the natural runoff of surface and percolating water to provide for improved drainage. So that was my main concern, is this isn't just, set within that rear setback. From the diagrams we've been giving, there's fill, and a great deal of the house is being built over the edge of the bluff, into the bluff, going down. And so I'm curious as to these two conditions that have to be met. Will there be, as the construction is going on, will that work even with retaining walls? Will that compromise the integrity or stability of the bluff of those neighboring properties?
I can just say, during the permitting process, we will review that. What's applied for tonight is the conditional use for the chimneys. And so I don't want to muddy those two different topics. So when they apply for permits, the building inspector will review all plans, including an engineering report that verifies the bluff will be stabilized. If they can't provide that, then they would need to modify the home, design of the home. I don't think that impacts the chimneys under.
Yeah, because public safety with the chimney is hard to, I'm not quite sure how that would work out. Other safety as far as that part of the construction is
Yeah,
concerned.
everything will be reviewed to code by the building inspector at the time of, permit application, so that I think would be covered regardless of the chimney discussion or not.
Anybody else? Okay, well, seeing there's no further discussion, President Rosick, did you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to let the architect relay the message to the county exec, welcome to the neighborhood. If it is approved, I think this is the last approval, is that correct, Bart? Besides zoning, besides, permits?
By a elected body or representative body, correct, just permitting would be the next step.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, but I don't know what it says, so we'll have to.
Yep.
read it.
Okay, so you're moving to approve the consideration of conditional use application to construct 4 chimneys that exceed the maximum building height on a new single-family resident at residential property 3534 North Lake Drive, property owner Chris Avery.
Yes.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So the next item on our agenda is to schedule our next meeting, which is scheduled for October 22nd. There are currently no items submitted, and but the count committee has been arranged for that date. Instead, do we have any further?
Yeah, so as you're aware, we've twice tried to arrange the US Census to come in to give training for the complete count committee, and they have twice pulled back their approval after I polled and scheduled you guys, so I was kind of a little upset about that. But they did confirm, without a doubt, which they say that October 22nd is available for them. Since we have no items scheduled for regular review, I offer them that this would be a good time for everyone, just because it isn't your typical routine. So unless there's a reason to not hold that, we would not hold a plan commission meeting on October 22nd, but we would hold a complete count committee meeting at the same time, or the typical time. So
Do you know about how long or what?
it's a 2-hour training. They did provide an agenda. Some of that is introductions and things, so I'm hoping it could go quicker if we're all familiar with each other already, but I also asked if a webinar or something was available and they wanted to do it in
I know.
person.
We're going to be out of town
Okay.
that date, so
I can get a pizza.
she's offering pizza.
Oh, yeah, so if that works out, I will reconfirm with them that we're scheduled for that, but there'll be no plan commission then in October. Unless for some reason the next item tells me differently.
Okay, does anybody have any future agenda items they'd like to discuss and obtain consensus on to bring for our future agenda?
I do.
Yep.
Oh, okay, good. Mark, what was it during budget, oh, can the planning commission address this? You said yes, but can you talk to the planning commissioners?
I don't know if that was in budget or if that was in the last special privilege approval at the village board level.
Okay.
And I promised to review the current code and ordinance to perhaps require that special privileges be recorded against the property so that future owners know that those privileges are there. That would require an ordinance amendment. The plan commission could provide a recommendation, but they're not required to. So I can provide,
Okay, I'll have to budget, but that one sounds good.
No, but that one was definitely something we.
that's my memory of what we discussed
Yeah.
Mondays, 2 Mondays ago.
Yeah, and I think that was, we proposed looking at the fee, at changing the fee schedule and bringing that to planning commission. And I do think that that's something that we're challenged with pretty regularly, so I think that that would be something to bring forth.
Yep,
So if possible, I could bring it forth in November,
Yep.
as long as it's approved by next January when the fee schedule kicks in. I think November would be fine for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we have any other commission initiatives for either this year that we haven't dealt with yet, or that we're going to jump on for next year that have been approved?
The comprehensive plan is the big one coming up, and the board will be approving a budget in a few weeks that will give me a determination as to how much money we have to spend on that, at which point then I'll prepare a scope of services to reconfirm with everyone. My understanding is that we're going to be incorporating a lot of current planning efforts into the new comprehensive plan, so we would be reviewing the scope of that before the RFP is issued for either a consultant or additional in-house staff. But to my knowledge, that's the next one on the to-do list, is getting the comprehensive plan up and running.
So nothing else for this year that we're supposed to get done, we just haven't turned our attention to?
I'd have to take a second look at the list, but there's honestly no other time between now and then. The comprehensive plan has to get done.
Okay.
It's on the list, but I don't think we have majority approval for it. So people.
For what, the comprehensive plan update?
Yeah, it wasn't put on the list by a trustee.
Yeah, so for reference, the board goes through every agenda item, and if there's questions on it, they put it on a list for rediscussion at a further meeting. So the amount of this, and I believe the source of it, were questioned, and so that hasn't been finalized yet, but it's currently proposed as $30,000, I think, of capital reserve funding. And so there is further discussion to confirm that amount, but like I said, once the board confirms that, I'll bring that back to the planning commission so that we can prepare a scope of services for the RFP.
Any other items for future consideration?
Are we done with the porch?
The porch, yes, the board did adopt the porch ordinance. We've had 0 applications since, but it is available if someone wants to, to go for it.
Okay, I'll enter a motion.
Move to adjourn. Second.
We will adjourn at 6:58 PM.
We have to vote on that or not? No?
Oh,
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
yes, all those in favor? Sorry. Aye.
Aye.